Welcome home to St. Anne's.
Terrible MS day. So we're just gonna take things as they come today. How's that?
We want you to know
like that's every
that you're
Sunday,
welcome
right?
to join us at 10 a.m. on Sundays. Please be sure to hit subscribe to receive our sermons. We can't wait to meet you.
Don't get a chronic illness. It's terrible. I mean, if you're looking for a hobby, I can give you some good ones. This is not one of them. All right. Patience is the virtue. Not that I have it, but I heard about it in the Bible. And they say it is. All right. Let's talk about today's gospel, shall we? All righty. And I will try not to talk too long because I have to talk again at annual meeting. Surprise, it's annual meeting. I don't advertise it much because, it results in no one coming to church but me. And that's no fun. So I just kind of spring it on you. It's fine. The Vester knew about it. I didn't spring it on everyone. Just you guys. So I won't talk too long, but I do think that this is a pretty important. I mean, they're all important gospels. Who am I kidding? It's all important. But I do think there are some fun things in this story. Remember last week, if you were here or listening last week, I said Mark is our loves a good miracle Mark. So have you noticed that he's got some more going? He loves a good miracle. One of the fun things that I think is important to notice about this gospel is just how sometimes Scripture is different than tradition. You're like, what? Yeah, would you believe sometimes in tradition we manipulate things to fit our story? I know, crazy, right? I mean, not in the church. We wouldn't do that here. Okay, Simon, who is going to be Peter, is also the first pope. Simon has a wife because he has a mother-in-law. You know how you get mother-in-laws? You marry badly. Sorry, that's terrible. I don't feel bad about it, though. Think about that joke eventually. Okay, anyway, in church history, tradition says that clergy can't marry, priests can't marry, because, that would be bad. You want to know why the tradition really exists? Sandra's got it. It's this. Right around the Middle Ages, early Middle Ages, they realized that that these clergy people frequently come out of fairly affluent families, right? And I don't know if you've noticed this about me, but if you are married and have a family, your attention and your loyalty is split, right? Do you know how much money I would have to give to this church if I didn't have to pay for these children? Their music lessons and all my husband's needs. He's got expensive taste. He really does. And if you just said, Meg, it's got to be just you, I would have a lot more money to pour into this church. I really would. And my loyalty, because right now, you know that sometimes I'm busy on the weekends or I'm busy during the week, right? I've got lessons and, spending time with my family is kind of a big deal. Sometimes, most of the time, I enjoy them. I mean, there are some times I'd rather be with you all. So the church kind of realizes this, and they're like, if we told clergy that they couldn't marry, all that money that they inherit from their affluent families, because remember I said they generally come from affluent families, because you have to be somewhat educated to do this. I mean, you're like, really? Prove it. I am somewhat educated. Would you believe that? I know, it's adorable, but I am. All that money would get inherited by the church, right? They would get it all. And suddenly all that time and all that energy and all that loyalty would go to the church. And so they're like, tradition states. Scripture is very clear. Clergy should not marry. And the clergy were dumb enough to be like, all right, I ain't questioning that. And then nobody ever pointed out that the first pope was married, because we just skipped that gospel, because so there's a lot of money. That's why you got the sweet stuff at the Vatican. Anyone been to the Vatican? They got some good stuff. I highly recommend going to the Vatican, because there's some good stuff there. That's how you get it. That's how you get it. You inherit a bunch of money, and you never pay for anything. It's great. I highly recommend that mode of financial gain. Yeah. Inherit it, don't spend it. That's your advice from me. Okay, so anyway, not the point. None of that's the point. I just love a good history story. You know that. What really is the point that I want us to think about is Jesus. Because sometimes in the church, and for those of us in our faith journey, we kind of choose an area that we want to focus on. So maybe being a loner is your natural tendency. So you might say, I'm not into all that, ministry stuff. I'm really more into spirituality. I like to pray a lot. I like to study scripture a lot, right? Because that fits you. And then there are other people who are like me, who are intense extroverts, who have ADHD, and we like to be busy a lot. And we're like, I know you can't tell that, I have a lot of energy, but, I do. My first bishop was like, oh, my God, Meg, imagine what you would be like without MS. And I was like, yeah, imagine. Just imagine what it was like to be me, to be around me. It was amazing. It was wonderful. It was exciting all the time. And so there are other people who are like ministry. We like to go out and do stuff. We want to be around people. We want to help people. We like to do. We like to be doing things, right? And we all know the doers, right? They just love to do things. But they're so busy doing that sometimes that faith and that spirituality and that study of Scripture is a little bit lacking. And what Jesus models to us is a both-and way of ministry. So in Mark and in, frankly, all the Gospels, Jesus is very, very busy. You think about how much Jesus does in really only a couple of years. Jesus starts his ministry very late in life. So this all happens in his early 30s. His entire ministry is going to happen in his early to mid-30s. You ever think, what have I done with my life? Because I'm rolling in on the 5th anniversary of my 35th birthday this year, and I don't want to think about it. From now on, we're just having anniversaries of my 35th birthday from here on out. But Jesus' model is different. Jesus' model is to be out there, to be doing, right? He does a lot of ministry. But then suddenly, he'll just disappear. And he'll go somewhere alone and be deep in Scripture and prayer. And he'll do that for a while. And both of those things feed the other. And that is the model that you and I need. Our ministry must feed our faith. Because if we're not doing anything, we're wasting so much. Do you want to know one of the big reasons that we have so much mental illness? Because we have time. Yeah, right? It is because we're not busy living for something. And if you don't have a purpose, if you're not living for something outside of yourself, it gets ugly. If you are constantly living for others and constantly out there doing, it gets ugly. Because burnout will also lead to mental illness. And so, we need a both-and life. We need a both-and life. We need a both-and. We are living. We have purpose. We are committed to outside of ourselves. We are committed to changing the world. We are committed to loving other people. We are committed to that work. We also need to be committed to our own inner self, our own inner work, and our own spirituality and faith. Because if those aren't both happening, we get off the tracks and things get ugly real fast. And you know they do, don't you? I'll be the first to tell you, like, I came to church, I cried in here when I first got here. Because I've had a rough week. If you had the misfortune of hearing some of my stories, either yesterday or today, it's been a rough week. It has. It's been rough. And if I'm not really doing my own stuff, my own work, which means coming to God and taking that time and saying, I'm not okay. I'm not okay. Because my life is generally one that is focused outside of self. Like, right? Because I'm one of those great examples. If you are so focused outside of yourself, you don't have to worry about your own stuff. I'll be honest with you. That is my mode, right? In fact, one of my first therapists was like, so, like, have you noticed? And I was like, I've noticed. Not going to change it. And he's like, how do you deal with, all these things that you have going on? And I said, I focus on other people. And he's like, so how's that working for you? And I was like, maybe not great, but it's working great for other people. So, hey. But we all have kind of our way of dealing with things, right? Are you somebody who retracts and goes into self and is focused on self? And sometimes maybe too much? Because we're not meant to be like that. We're herd animals. We are meant for community. We are meant to care for our larger community. That's just how we are. And if we're not, if we're so insular and so in self, things get really bad, really fast. Also, while we are herd creatures and communal creatures, we are also spiritual creatures. We are also individuals. We are divine beings. And if we don't spend the time in Scripture and in prayer and committed to our faith, it gets really ugly really fast. So Jesus is a great example of how we're meant to do this. Because we're meant to be in ministry. We are meant to be in community. We are meant to change the world. We are called to do that by the very being of our nature of being human. We're called to that. We are not called to self. We're not. And yet, we are called to self. We are. I know, don't you love a good both and sermon? It's so fun. It's so fun. And yet, so I want us to really think about that. And as we go into our annual meeting, I want you to really think about that because the church is a larger model of that, right? Have I ever talked to you about systems? You're like, please don't. Please don't. We're good. Yeah, I feel like if you don't understand systems, go home and Google it. You can talk to me about it, but there are people way more educated than me who can help you understand systems. But the reality is, the human individual mirrors larger systems, right? So the human, the individual, mirrors the family. And the family mirrors larger groups. And you just keep going up, right? So all of these things will mirror the human condition. So churches are systems because we're a group of people, just like your family is a system. The beautiful thing about systems is they love to recreate themselves. They just recreate themselves. That's what they're committed to. And if you have a broken system, it will perpetuate itself. It will continue. That's why everybody should study your family history. You really should, because you'll notice patterns if you do it right. You'll notice, you might notice educational patterns. You might notice addiction patterns. You might notice social problems, right? You'll notice these problems that keep happening. So the easiest thing to do is to just ignore it. The thing that we have to do is to study it, and then we recreate positive things in our system, right? So there are positive things in your system just as well as there are toxic things. The same is true of churches. So many churches will have kind of a flavor of an ethos, right? There are the churches who are super, super committed to outside ministry. That's what they're into. And then there are other churches who are like, hey, we got this liturgy thing down. And they are really committed to scripture and liturgy. That's what they're good at. And they're really committed to it. And then there are other churches who are really good about building up spirituality and individual faith. That's their thing. They're solid at it. They're really, really good. But I'm going to tell you the problem. We're supposed to be doing all of it. We're supposed to be doing all of it. We are supposed to be building up the Christian life here, right? Feeding and getting really solid in scripture and development of faith. And then going out and doing something with it. And then while you're out doing something, I promise you will change. You'll be fed by the doing and the change of the world. When you are out in the world and you see it and you're in it, suddenly all that scripture stuff and that faith stuff will make a little bit more sense to you. And when you are exhausted from doing, because you will get burnt out, because humans are exhausting. I don't know if you haven't noticed or not, but have you met them? Have you met other people? They're exhausting. Then it's important to come back. So this is a constant cycle that should be happening. The faith and the spirituality and the scripture, the doing, commitment to others in the world. Does that make sense at all? And if not, good news. There will be another sermon next week. And if you're really, really lucky, it won't be a both and.
We want you to know that you're welcome to join us at 10 a.m. on
But I
Sundays.
think we should
Please
all
be
give
sure to
thanks
hit
my
subscribe
first
to
bishop
receive
for
our
bringing out
sermons.
that
We can't
fact.
wait to meet you.
Imagine what I would be like if I weren't exhausted all the time. Just think what I could do.